Hi, and welcome to the Revive, Thrive, and Optimize podcast. I'm Billy Weiss, compounding pharmacist and health and wellness expert. Really glad to have y'all here today. And across from me is Janet, and behind the scenes is producer Mike.
Good morning, Billy.
Good morning,
Mike. And I'm saying good morning because it's dark outside and getting kind of cold. But it's great to be here, and I've got some good questions. Last time we spoke, we had Ask Billy. People write me questions, and then I bring them to you, and we try to get some answers. And the last couple of podcasts, you guys, it was not me and Billy, because we've had some awesome testimonials where people were like, no, I want to be on the next podcast because I want to share the amazing things that are happening through these lifestyle changes. So stay tuned for some awesome testimonials. And today we're back to Ask Billy, and I have a question.
All right, let's hear it.
All right. So as we're going through menopause, and I guess you could also say man-opause, what are the effects of our gut health on our hormones?
Yeah, Janet, I can't make a direct link to the gut and the hormones, but most researchers today now, medical researchers, will name the gut the second brain of the body. And we know that 70 to 80% of our immune system is found in the gut. And so certainly while the gut doesn't maybe play a direct role in hormones, it plays a direct role in our overall health and our overall way we feel and perform and act and think. So I can't make a direct connection, but I can tell you that if your gut's not healthy, it's going to be very hard to have a healthy hormone level, because everything is then going to be off. And you're going to be more prone to everything that's coming and going. So not a direct link, but hopefully, as you said, it's dark out this morning. It's going to be light, and we can bring some light to some of these questions as we go.
Well, aren't our hormones made out of cholesterol? So, talk about the cholesterol in our diet. Good, bad, we need cholesterol.
Yeah, so when
make our hormones, right?
When you say hormones, we'll talk sex hormones. Mm-hmm. So testosterone, progesterone, estradiol, DHEA, pregnenolone, those hormones certainly at the top of where they start to be made is cholesterol, which is why I think blocking our natural cholesterol production can be a real problem, because not only does it affect, cholesterol is found in every cell in our body. Mm. And most of the cholesterol that we have in our bodies, the vast majority is actually made by our bodies. It's not what we take in.
Okay.
Now, that can have some effect, but it's a very small effect. So cholesterol is an antioxidant. It is necessary for life. And so when we block cholesterol, we will certainly have the opportunity to unfortunately lower those hormones that start with that cholesterol molecule.
When you say block cholesterol, you mean like statins?
Yeah, I mean
or just
a statin
not eating
drug.
any fat?
Well, both.
Okay.
Both or either, not taking in enough dietary fat. Mm-hmm. And certainly when we start to block the pathway that makes cholesterol in the liver, we're going to lower the cholesterol for sure. But I'm not sure that there's a real benefit to that when you look at the studies.
Okay.
So yes, it can affect our hormones tremendously when we don't get in enough fat, or we don't get in, or we take a drug that will block our body's ability to make cholesterol. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that's overlooked. It's how important cholesterol is in our testosterone, our progesterone, our estradiol, our DHEA, our pregnenolone, and so forth. And, that's something that we didn't hit on in any of the hormone talks we've done. So they could go back and watch how important these hormones are.
Yeah. We break it all down, all the different hormones.
Right.
And I love to talk about hormones, and I love to talk about gut health, because I think one of the biggest changes in my life and benefits from being on your program for the last 9 years is I think I can say I have healed my gut. Right. And that's been a lifelong, almost 62-year struggle. Okay, so Billy, I had another question, and this question has come in by more than one person. And it's cold and flu season, and a lot of people are getting sinus infections, and my friends who are on antibiotics or yet another round of steroids and things like that are asking, what's this doing to my gut? So what's the connection back to the gut again? We talked about gut and hormones a little bit. So gut, what happens to your gut when you're taking antibiotics? What happens to your gut when you're taking steroids? And how does that throw everything else off?
No, Janet, that's a really good question from the folks who are asking that. So I appreciate that question, because anytime we take an antibiotic, we permanently change, for the negative, for the bad, our gut flora. Our gut flora, the good bacteria in there can't fully recover from the antibiotic, because the antibiotic is like a carpet bomb. It can kill the bad bacteria, certainly, which is a great thing, but it doesn't distinguish good and bad. So when we take in antibiotics, we're going to kill some good bacteria and some bad bacteria, and the good bacteria can't fully recover. So anytime in the research that antibiotics are taken, we permanently change our gut flora, okay, our gut bacteria.
Is that for steroids also?
Well,
what's the difference between, say, antibiotics and steroids?
Yeah, so
sorry, I'm getting ahead.
No, antibiotics. That's a great question too. So anti means against, right? Biotic means life. So antibiotics are against life. Now, again, I get why we have to use them sometimes, but it should absolutely only be a last resort, because now we're carpet bombing and killing our good and bad bacteria. Whereas a probiotic, pro means for and biotic means life, so for life. So certainly if we're going to be on an antibiotic, at the very least, we should be on the OptiU probiotic, and we should double that, and we should take it at least 2 hours away from the antibiotic, because if we don't, the antibiotic's just going to destroy the probiotic, okay?
That is another huge question. Like, do I take my yogurt and my probiotic while I'm taking antibiotics? And you're saying yes, but it has to be 2 hours outside of when you take it.
Yeah, if you don't wait the 2 hours, you're going to just destroy all the good bacteria again with the antibiotic, right? Okay. So we want to make sure that I tell people, let's not only take the probiotic, let's double the probiotic, but let's do it 2 hours away, because most people are taking antibiotic twice a day, most typically. And so we want to do a probiotic 2 hours from the first dose and 2 hours away from the second dose, right? After, right, is most common. And so that's one way to prevent. Over 70% of people that take antibiotics end up having antibiotic-induced diarrhea. And that's just because they're killing off their good flora. It's very easy to explain and very easy to prevent, but they have to take those probiotics. So
you don't just have a cold and flu and sinus infection, but now you got diarrhea.
Well, yeah, and what you've done, Janet, unfortunately, what we see over and over, and what I've seen in the past 35 years in the pharmacy world, is people take this, let's just say Z-Pak, okay? They take a Z-Pak because that's one of the most commonly prescribed antibiotics today. They take a Z-Pak for their cold or their sinus symptoms, which are viral 99% of the time, and the antibiotic is going to serve no purpose other than to weaken their immune system. And so then they get, guess what? They get another cold or another viral infection, or they get another, and maybe they do now get a bacteria.
Worse and worse. Okay.
Yeah, so it makes them more prone to the next thing that's coming along. And you've probably know people who are, I won't say chronically, but they're on antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic. And it's because I'm afraid that they're actually making their immune system, remember 80% is found in the gut, they're making it weaker every time they take that antibiotic. Now, you throw in a steroid. Now, steroid is not against life, so it doesn't kill directly bacteria in the gut, but steroids are very hard on the gut, okay? And that's why they will typically say, the pharmacist will say, or put a sticker on it, take with food, because it's very bad on the prostaglandin system in the gut, which we won't get into, just to know that it can cause upset stomach again. So now you got an antibiotic causing diarrhea, you got a steroid, a prednisone, or a Medrol, methylprednisolone, that's causing havoc in the gut. And now you really have the sick stomach, the feeling, of diarrhea, nausea, and all these things. The real problem with the steroid use over and over and over is that steroids, the way they work, they drastically raise our glucose or sugar levels in the body, which then, of course, makes the insulin go up, right?
Yeah.
Which creates inflammation.
I did not know that.
And the other big thing that the steroids do, again, when used multiple times and, over and over and over, or steroid shots for pain, they have a very damaging effect on our bones.
Wow.
And so they can really create a lot of
So
osteoporosis
if you're
and
prone already
osteopenia.
to osteoporosis, osteopenia, and you're taking steroids, or it sounds like if you have an autoimmune disease that's kind of dormant, that taking steroids could turn that on.
Absolutely, because
Okay.
autoimmunity starts in the gut.
Okay.
If you have a skin condition, now the steroids will temporarily make all those things feel better.
Yeah, and you feel
Okay.
great when you're on steroids.
Yeah, because the steroid will reduce the inflammation short term. And so if they have an inflammatory autoimmune condition, they will feel better. Or if they have a breakout on their skin, that steroid will temporarily typically help clear that
But
up.
it's short term.
But it's short term, and then it's going to probably come back worse because we're not doing anything to correct the issue. So what my goal is for people is to not need antibiotics, to not need steroids by doing the things that we talk about. And Janet, you know, what's so frustrating to me is that in America, we pay 10 times more for the average drug than other countries. And we use the most drugs in the world, but we have the worst outcomes in the world. And it's because our lifestyles don't fit the 5 pillars. I mean, it's not very much more complicated than that, but everybody is into, you know, convenience, food that's pre-made, pre-packaged, full of just junk, toxins, to say the least, sprayed with all these chemicals that are destroying our hormone systems, destroying our bacteria in our gut, our good probiotics, our good gut flora. And then we wonder, why do we have to go to the doctor all the time and get antibiotics and steroids? And it's just, it's like you know, the way I always explain it at the summit, and you've heard this multiple times, it's like the snowball is going down the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm afraid when we take antibiotics and steroids over and over and over, that's what we're doing. The snowball's going down the hill and it's getting bigger. It's not getting smaller.
Well, and it's the mental health aspect of it too, because so much of our gut and our brain connection, right? But then our feel good. What's the word I'm looking? Endorphins.
Dopamine.
Our
endorphins.
dopamine.
Yep.
All that is made in our gut. And
Correct.
when you take an antibiotic, now they're saying you're prone for major depression. Like just from one course of antibiotics, well, you become very depressed.
95% of the serotonin that we make, which is what all the antidepressant drugs are working toward increasing, like your Prozacs, your Zolofts, your those type drugs. They are to increase serotonin in the brain, but nobody ever thinks and asks. And you bring up a point that I can guarantee you 99% of the medical community doesn't know. 95% of the serotonin is made in the gut. So if I have a bad gut, if I don't have the right bacteria to make the serotonin, then depression is going to be much more prominent.
I think that's huge. And I think that's, like you said, a huge thing that people don't know, that an antibiotic can cause depression. I mean, link those two things.
Well, an antibiotic can cause depression. And Janet, this is kind of how it works in America. And I know I'm kind of getting off on a tangent from the questions, but I think this is an important way a great way to explain to people what happens. So they go on an antibiotic and a steroid for the cold, right? Which is probably viral, and there's zero benefit,
not going to help.
Actually harm if you look at the studies. And then maybe they do have diarrhea or depression or both. Then they need something for that, right? Then we put them on, or they're put on Zoloft, we'll call it.
Here goes the snowball down the hill.
And then they needed some Imodium, right? All right. So then they've never had a probiotic. They've never taken their vitamin D. They're not trying to make their immune system any better. Now they're on a drug for depression that over time can actually increase depression and suicide rates, okay, and especially in young adults, teenagers, and children. And so then they need the next drug, right? And so while all this is going on and their serotonin's low, we know that we have chronically low testosterone levels in men and women today, for the most part. I mean, most men and women. We know in the studies clearly that testosterone levels have dropped over the past 50 years for men and women. And testosterone makes dopamine work in our brain. So it is a feel-good hormone. So now we're low in serotonin. We're trying to bump it up with a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're low in testosterone, so we're low in dopamine, and people just don't feel good.
And that's men and women when it
That's
comes
men
to
and
the
women. So when you
testosterone
talk
going
about the
down.
mental effects, it's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous, and it's heartbreaking what you see because people will tell me all the time, I just don't feel like myself anymore. And I don't know if that, when they tell me that, I don't think so much physical, I think mental. You know, that's the first thing that pops in my mind. Okay, what's your testosterone level? For a woman, what's your progesterone, your estradiol levels? You know, so it's so much more downstream effects to antibiotics and prednisone. And again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It just means that we want to minimize it. And I believe that if we keep our immune system up with the foundational 4, with the vitamin D, with the super C when we need it, with Vericid if we have something coming on, we can avoid at least 90 to 95% of all antibiotic prescriptions.
I was going to say, you know, it's so helpful to take your class because you can't get it all. You have to take it more than once. That's a lot. But, you know, one of the most important things is, yes, people are going to take antibiotics. They're going to take steroids, but you can help them by telling them to take their probiotics, double up on the probiotics, take it 2 hours after you take the antibiotic, and then that can help. And there's so many useful things that we learn in your class, how we can combat these things that we've been doing or these things that we are doing like that. And then, of course, with learning about hormones and hormone replacement therapy. So, you know, real quick plug for January 4th and 5th, Saturday and Sunday, to take your wellness summit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to learn. It
has healed my gut. 9 years of working with you, and I can finally say, I think my gut is healed.
Well, and if they listen to the previous 2 episodes to this, where I interviewed, you weren't here, I'm sorry.
Amazing testimonials.
Bill and Lydia, and both of them had gut issues and had been on drugs for their gut for, well, I think Bill was 25 years for a drug you're never supposed to be on more than 12 weeks. And now, while he said it's not perfect, it's much better than it was, and he's not having to take that drug that can create those 398 plus side effects, right?
Yeah, just like if you've been doing something for 25 years, it's not going to maybe clear up in a few weeks.
Correct.
And I know that, you know, I abused my gut for 60-something years. You know, it's taken a little while.
Right. Yeah, but the good news is the body can turn it around, and you're living proof of that. Yeah. I mean, and you're not the only one. But if we give the body what it needs, I say it all the time, and we take away the junk, and junk's just my general term for all the stuff people are doing.
Alcohol, sugar.
Cigarettes, alcohol, sugar, tobacco, all those things.
Soft drinks. Fast food.
The body will amazingly make turnarounds in most cases. It's really crazy what the body can do. Yeah. It really is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that question led us down a rabbit hole. So go to the next one before we keep going.
Well, let's see. We have another question. Or maybe we should end there. Next one's going to be a big one. And it's, why are so many people insulin resistant? That's going to take us down a long rabbit hole. Yeah. Yeah, we got lots of questions.
Well, we can definitely touch on it, and then we probably need to do a whole series of shows or a show on
Absolutely.
Okay. So the bottom line on why so many people are insulin resistant is what they're eating. They can say that it was their grandma or their grandpa or their mom or their dad or their, whoever. It's not.
Maybe it's because they've been taking lots of steroids and it raises your blood sugar and it makes you crave sugar and eat more when you take your steroids.
That's something I didn't bring up. It's how steroids make you eat more and not sleep well. We talked about some of the other things, but you're dead on. But plain and simple, the insulin resistance, which most people don't even realize they are insulin resistant.
Doesn't it take about 10 years to be diagnosed for?
It's 10 to 15 years, they say, before the A1C starts to rise, which is the kind of the 90-day blood sugar average, because nobody's checking their insulin. Right. Their insulin has risen before. And the way they know that their insulin is high, the most common ways they can know their insulin is high is, number one, excess fat somewhere on the body, most typically in the gut. And they
Visceral
may
fat.
not necessarily know it if it's visceral fat,
Because you can't
right?
see it.
But a lot of people know they're overweight, right? But you can't see that visceral fat, correct? So it's not always obvious. Number 2 is high blood pressure.
Inflammation.
So the high inflammation from the high insulin will create the blood pressure issues. And I believe it's Wake Forest University says 76% of high blood pressure is actually due to insulin resistance.
Go Deeks.
So, yeah, so, we have that. And then the third thing that people would typically notice with the insulin resistance is they would probably have more aches and pains than the average person because it does create inflammation, not only in the arterial system, which causes or contributes to the high blood pressure, but maybe in their back, their arms, their knees,
joints,
their shoulders, their, whatever. And then the fourth thing you'll find with most of these insulin resistance people is they have just crazy, their cholesterol numbers just look out of whack, right? Their triglycerides will be really high. Their HDL is typically either low or not optimal.
Hangry.
And they just, So it is, if you look at the studies, it's over 88% of Americans in some studies and over 95% of Americans in some studies. But nobody's checking their insulin. And we talked about, well, that's the most important test. But the bottom line to the answer to the question is, it's what they're putting in their bodies, plain and simple. We're taking in, massive amounts of soft drinks. The biggest, this blows my mind. The biggest thing bought with assistance, food stamps, is the way that may not be the proper term today, but the biggest thing bought with that type of government food assistance is soft drinks. It's by far number one. The majority.
It shouldn't even be allowed to be one of the things you can get.
It's mind blowing to me that we allow that, and that people who may have a disadvantage in their health anyway, now they're using this for soft drinks. And it's just maybe lack of education, as much as anything.
It's cravings too, though. When your gut's out of whack and you crave certain things, it's like you're a drug.
Sure.
You're a drug addict.
These things are addictive. Now you have to remember, and I'll get back to answering the question of the insulin resistance. But it is, you have to remember that in the I think don't quote me on the dates, okay? But when the government come out and said cigarettes are really bad for us, right? And we went on this kind of war on smoking, we'll call it. The tobacco companies, I can't remember, R.J. Reynolds and can't remember the name of the other one, but there were two major tobacco companies, the big ones, the big boys. When they realized that cigarette sales were going down, what did they do?
They hired their scientists to make us
food.
Addicted to food.
That's correct. They started buying up all the big food manufacturers. So actually who owns the majority of the food companies
were the tobacco
companies who took those same scientists who made smoking addictive.
And now
if you don't believe smoking's addictive, you need to do what I've done for the past 35 years. And they took those same scientists and said, let's make food addictive. Now, here's what's happened since then. 70% of every dollar, 70 cents out of every dollar spent today is spent on processed, prepackaged food. Okay? Now, the problem with that is there's over 10,000 chemicals in America allowed that are called GRAS, G-R-A-S, generally recognized as safe. These chemicals were designed, a lot of these 10,000 chemicals were designed by these cigarette scientists to make this food addictive. So when you say it drives them, or the way, I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but it makes you want more, they really have studied that and put these chemicals in there to make us want more. Now and it's
not that you're a weak individual when you're craving something. I mean, it's a real thing.
Oh, it's a real thing for sure.
It's like you got to have that Coke like you had to have that cigarette.
Well, the more of those things you take in, the more the cravings, again, the snowball going down the hill. So what happens is when you think about Europe allows about 50 of those of the 10,000
that we allow here in the United States, and that's a crime.
If you look at the ingredients on a processed packaged food here, versus other countries. It's not
made
even
by
close.
the same company.
Made by the same company.
It's completely different ingredients.
But they can use it here. They can make it more addictive. They can save money because those ingredients are typically really cheap. And so the reason that people are insulin resistant, to get back to it, is the food and the drink that they eat. It's plain and simple. I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it another 1,000 times. Type 2 diabetes does not have to exist. And so
many people who have type 2 diabetes are being told by their doctors there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, they're not only being told by their doctors, they're being told by the American Medical Association, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, all these 3-letter agencies, right?
I think we need to have a whole podcast on type 2 diabetes.
Well, they're being taught that it's a chronic progressive disease, and it absolutely is not. It does not have to be. Now, if you follow what they teach, it absolutely will be a chronic progressive disease.
It keeps you in that cycle. Yeah.
So the insulin resistance is because of the foods they eat, number one, most importantly, and what they drink. I'll make that one category. So what's pillar number one? God-given quality food. The second reason that people are insulin resistant is they don't have the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals to utilize sugar and insulin very efficiently.
Not taking correct supplements.
And what's pillar number two? The world's best nutritional supplements. And then number three is water from a medical device. So we put that back to number one, food and drink that they're getting, supplements. And then the next thing that comes in is they're lazy. They don't move anymore, right? We're on a screen.
Yeah.
The average child in America today is on a screen 7 hours a day. That's mind-blowing. Now, I don't know what it is.
And when you're not moving, your blood sugar goes higher. When you move after you eat, it takes your blood sugar down.
That's correct. A 15 to 20-minute leisurely walk after a meal decreases insulin response by up to 50%. A 2-minute walk decreases the insulin response some. So all these factors of the food supply that we have today, the choices that people are making, the lack of the right vitamins, which is why the foundational 4 is so critical. Magnesium deficiency is rampant. Okay, and
especially
remember, high insulin makes the body spit more magnesium out in the urine. So now the deficiency continues.
Snowball.
And so, that's that snowball. So I know we're out of time, but you asked some really, really important questions that we can probably just piggyback in the next episode or another episode and keep going.
Yeah, you guys keep sending questions. These are great.
So the bottom line is, if you haven't had your fasting insulin tested,
get your
fasting insulin tested. It's the most important test you can have. So make sure that you either encourage strongly your provider to do it, or just contact us and we can do it. It's less than $50 to get the most important test you can.
You can walk into LabCorp yourself and get it.
You can. It's going to cost more if you do it that way. But if we can order it, since we order so many, we can save them some money.
Gotcha.
But yeah, absolutely, it's the most important test.
And you want your fasting insulin to be under 5, 4, 2.5 to 4?
We'll go, ideally, optimally would be 2 to 4. We tell people, if you're 2 to 6, we can live with that, But if it's more than 6, you're going to start to... Now, look, the lab says, most labs say 26.7 is normal. Okay, like 2 point something to 26.7. It may be normal, but it's not healthy.
Right.
It may be the norm in America. It may be more than that now. But remember, they're basing those numbers off the average American. You don't want to be, I keep telling people,
the average American.
You do not want to be the average American. So 2 to 4 would be ideal. All right. Thank you, Janet, so much. The sun's coming up. Hopefully we brought some light. See ya.
That's good.